This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground magazine.
Hi, welcome to another episode of WCM's Park Update. I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and of course, my esteemed colleague is Mike Gast, president, CEO, founder, whatever, of the Emiola Group, which is, what do you do there, Mike?
Oh, well, I do this, and I also consult for quite a few campgrounds still, help them out with their marketing, do a lot of content writing, and still work with KOA on a few projects.
There you go. Yeah, and our guest today, Kevin, I did not ask you before the show started how to pronounce your last name. So I'm going to say Kevin Thueson.
That's pretty close. Yeah, if you would have asked, you probably still would have got it wrong. It's Thueson.
Thueson, okay. And he's the CEO of KCN Campgrounds, which owns quite a few Kampgrounds of America. Well, all Kampgrounds of America so far. I believe you have 7 parks spread throughout the U.S. to some degree. I mean, you have some out west, and it looks like you're getting a couple more in the east, I guess.
Yeah, we started in Utah and have kind of expanded out east from there.
Yeah, and how long, I guess just give us a little bit of history of KCN, how you started the business, how long it's been going, and what you guys are focused on, I guess.
Yeah, so I started in campgrounds 6 years ago. I used to be in public accounting as a CPA, and when I left that job, I was living in Seattle at the time. I left that job and bought a small KOA in central Utah, town of 900 people, had 50-something sites when I bought it, and that was how I got in, and I ran that for a couple years on my own. Well, I say on my own, obviously. Had a really good team there helping. But a couple years in, I had an opportunity to bring on a partner, an old, long-time, lifelong friend, best friend from high school and college. We partnered and we bought 2 more in 2020. And then at that point, we really thought that there was an opportunity to scale and grow and do something big in this space. And so we looked for someone who had the skill set that we were missing to scale a business and build it out with the systems and processes. And that's when we brought on our partner, our third partner, Nate. So it's me, Cam, and Nate. And Nate's based in Seattle. Cam and I are in Utah. And that was in 2021. We started to have those discussions. It was actually Nate and I were on our annual camping trip with our daughters who were friends. That's how we met each other. And so every summer we do a road trip and camp together and go on adventures. And we were camping, stayed at 2 of our parks, 2 of our KOAs in Utah, and sitting around the campfire at night after going whitewater rafting and canyoneering and mountain biking. We started talking about the opportunity to build out a company and buy a lot of campgrounds and do something really cool in the outdoor hospitality space. And that's when KCN officially started. And then going into 2022 is when we started to work with investors, brought in some outside capital, and started purchasing properties. Bought 4 parks in 2022. In 2023, we slowed down quite a bit and focused on operating and doing the value-add expansions of the properties that we had. Actually sold a park in the fall of 2022, the first one that I had bought back in 2018. I guess that was the fall of 23. And then we just closed on another property, our 7th in March of this year. And we have an 8th one under contract right now to close later this summer or fall.
So Kevin, what do you look for when you do an expansion like that, especially as much as you did in 2022?
There's several things. When we first started, it was really like, what's the good opportunity? What's the pipeline? Where do we think it's a good market? There's value add. Does it hit all the fundamentals? And we weren't necessarily focused on a particular region or area. It was, is this park big enough to make sense for us? Do we think that there's enough meat on the bone that we can take it over, we can build it up, we can expand it? So we were looking for properties that had land that was undeveloped, or that had adjacent land that maybe we could buy. So we bought, for example, our first park we bought in 22 was the Sheridan Bighorn Mountains KOA in north central Wyoming. And, we looked at it, had a history of growing camper nights, growing revenue, was kind of an older and tired park. It needs some work, needs a facelift, but it had a couple acres of undeveloped property right along the creek. And we saw that there was a lot of demand for nicer 50 amp pull through premium sites. And at that time, that park only had, 15 or so sites that were big rig friendly. And so we saw an opportunity there. Fast forward 2 years, and we're about to complete an expansion of 17 sites there. We've added a couple of Conestoga wagons and a couple of new deluxe cabins, and moved all the cabins onto the creek. So they'll be like premium waterfront, creekfront properties, or creekfront cabins. So those are the types of things that we look for: is how can we add value? Do we think it's in an area that's going to grow? Is it a place that we would want to camp? Right? If it's not somewhere that I want to go, why would I expect someone else to want to go there? And then from there, it just kind of started heading east. Like Ben said, a lot of that was, as we learn more about this, there's more ways to diversify your portfolio. And a lot of that has to do with geography, population density. What does the tourism draw? A great example of that, again, talking about Sheridan, just a month or two after we bought it, Yellowstone had a big flood and the national park closed, and we had a slew of cancellations, and a lot of people weren't taking their trips up to that area. And so we took a pretty big hit in the first year. And so we learned from that, even though an attraction or a national park like Yellowstone is obviously an amazing place and people are always going to want to go there, if you're totally concentrated on one area or one particular thing, if something happens, then everything's impacted. So we've tried to diversify our portfolio across different markets, different geographies, different weather patterns.
So Kevin, you're obviously a big believer in the KOA brand. Do you find it more appealing to purchase an existing KOA or one that's not in the system yet and bring it in?
I think it depends. Yes, we love KOA. We started there, and a big piece of that was when I got into this, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about running a campground. I'd never stayed at a KOA before, and I liked the idea of a strong support system to help me figure it out. And KOA has been a great partner for us, which has led to a lot of opportunities, which is how we've grown within the KOA system. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of what we look for in other opportunities, if it's a KOA, then we know what we're getting. We know the support. We know that we have the customer base. We did look at a property that we had under contract that was not a KOA. We were really excited about it, and we had started the conversion process because we thought it was an open territory. There hadn't been a KOA in that market for over a decade, and we felt like that would be a great way to bring more attention, increase our camper nights, and really grow that property. And unfortunately, some things came up in due diligence that killed the deal for us, so we walked away from it. For us, I think it's more important to focus on, is it an existing property? Is it making money? Is it profitable? Whether it's a branded franchise or not. We almost bought a Yogi Bear Jellystone franchise last year that we were really excited about. And we're looking at various other independent properties with the idea of keeping them independent and having a little bit of flexibility in how we run those and the systems we use and the things we do. And, looking at other brands and what can we learn from those and from KOA to just make our portfolio and our operations better all around. And so we're open to all those different types of opportunities.
What are some of the key things you guys have learned through this process of acquiring parks, I guess? Maybe some advice you'd have for people who are also thinking about doing the same thing.
Oh, we've learned a lot. Could probably spend way more time than we have. to go through that. We learn something new on every deal that we do, and each
Yeah.
property is unique and has its own characteristics. I think, some of the more important things are making sure that you are really understanding the nature of the property. Why are people going there? Why are they going to continue to go there? What is it about that market that's attractive? Is it a destination area that's always going to bring people in? Or is it an area where you're going to have to really focus on marketing and drive awareness to it? So that if that's the case, when you're evaluating it, doing your underwriting, are you budgeting enough for your marketing? Is it a property that's going to require a significant amount of capital investment once you take it over, or is it more stabilized? And making sure that you are factoring in enough budget and reserves to handle those unexpected things. You can do as many inspections as you want. You're not going to catch every single thing that's wrong, and probably bet on having some sewer issues no matter what you do in your diligence. So make sure that you're budgeting for that.
Yeah.
And another thing that we've learned is really it's important the team that you work with, whether it's you doing it on your own and you're bringing in the right contractors or vendors, consultants. Is it for me, it was bringing on partners that can really help me fill in the gaps that I have in my toolkit. Is it a financing partner? Is it a franchise partner? Kind of understand where you need help, where you have the biggest blind spots, and then find the right people to fill those for you.
Yeah, definitely. How has the season been so far for you guys in 2024? Have you noticed people are still rushing to get outdoors, I guess?
Yeah, the attention and the excitement about outdoors, camping in general, traveling, RVing is still there. The last couple of years coming off of the big, COVID pandemic boom has leveled out a little bit, and we've seen some dips over the last 2 years in our camper nights. Our revenues have done well, and year to date, what we're seeing is the majority of our properties are performing at or near prior year numbers. We've had a couple that are down a little bit. For example, one of the properties we just bought this spring right before it opened, had a really down opening weekend. And when you have just bought the property and you're really excited about it, and you're talking to investors about how great this is going to be, and opening weekend is a big drop, that's not a great position to be in. But it didn't really take long for us to look at it and say, well, opening weekend 2023 average temperatures in that area were 85, and this year it was 42. So that kind of stuff happens and you can't control it. So you just have to understand the data. What we're seeing the biggest change in is in future reservations and booking windows. It seems from what we see in our portfolio and most of the people who we've talked to at KOA and other operators, is people just aren't booking their vacations as far ahead in advance as they were a couple years ago, which means it's a little bit harder for us to predict where our revenues are going to be. Do we think we'll catch that up later in the season? Is it a change in behavior? Time will tell. But we definitely still see and feel the excitement and the demand for people getting outside. And a lot of that just, we focus what we're working on to attract that, whether it's new experiences, new amenities, that kind of thing. You can't just have the same property, the same offering year after year after year and expect that more and more people are going to want to come.
Yeah, definitely. Well, definitely. Well, we'll take a minute. We got to recognize our sponsor, and we will be back with Kevin here in a minute.
Being outdoors and being with other kids that get it, and being with parents that get it, and not having to question their meds or why their hair is gone or why they are tired easily or why it's hard to walk.
So many kids who are sad because of their treatments, and this camp helps them forget. It helps everyone in the family forget for a little while, and it's really nice. It's just like a vacation from everything bad.
Hi, welcome back to WCM's Park Update. We were talking with Kevin from KCN Campgrounds, and Kevin, I guess when you're doing upgrades or improvements or expanding your parks, what's like the one amenity besides maybe a pool that you have to have at all of your parks that campers are really looking for, I guess?
I think it's probably two things. The first one that we look at and is usually easy, not necessarily in installing it or paying for it, but it's an easy one to identify, is Wi-Fi. That's an area that's always difficult for campgrounds. And there's some great vendors and providers out there, but we will typically go in as we're evaluating a property, and we'll walk around it with our phones and our iPads. And when we can, we stay at these properties before we buy them. And we test that out and find the areas where there's just poor coverage. And so we'll invest in a much more robust Wi-Fi distribution system. To some people's chagrin, we do or have been moving away from cable as an amenity and reallocating those resources towards a higher bandwidth on the internet and a better Wi-Fi distribution system to allow for streaming, which we see that being more important to our campers in the future. So that's one of them. And the other one is around pets. We across our 7 parks, we have some that are family parks, and it's all families and all kids. And then we have some where there's hardly any kids that are there, and it's more, retired or single or, grandparents on their way to go visit their kids. And so we see a lot of pets there. And so, we look at, does the campground have a really nice or a big dog park? Does it have enough dog parks? Is the one little 10 by 10 at the front of the park big enough? Does that make sense? And do we invest in some premium sites that have their own dog pens or paw pens, as KOA calls them? So those are the things that we do on the amenity side that are kind of the easy targets. And then obviously, as we get into the properties and understand them more and the guests more, we'll identify other things that we can do and add.
So Kevin, what are you finding out as the condition of the rates when you take over a park? Is there always room for rate management?
Well, I think rate management is more complex than that. It doesn't always mean it's just raising rates. We have seen that there are parks that have taken a very, very simple approach to it, and very nominal rate increases year over year that are not keeping up with the market. And there are well below market rates in that area. So that is an opportunity for us. Where we're focusing a lot of our time and effort now is being more adaptive to what those rates are, and trying to build out our own internal process for dynamic pricing, not just weekdays versus weekends, shoulder season versus peak season, holidays versus regular days, but evaluating our occupancy on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis and adjusting those rates accordingly. And that may mean bringing them down. It may mean offering different promotions or pushing extend your stay options at discounts, things like that, to try and overall give us a lift, but doesn't necessarily mean that we're just going to go in and take a 15% increase across the board for rates, because I don't think that that's the right answer for a lot of these parks.
Yeah, I mean, what is glamping? You mentioned obviously you have Conestoga wagons at some of your locations, cabins. What does glamping mean to you? Obviously, you've been to the glamping show. You've seen the variety of stuff that's there. Is that something you guys have thought about too? Maybe creating your own separate glamping park?
Yeah, I mean, we think about fun stuff like that all the time. To a very small extent, we have a little bit of glamping in a few of our parks. I would not categorize any of the KCN portfolio as a glamping resort. Some of our properties are a lot heavier in accommodations than others. But that's more of your traditional cabin that you would expect to see at a KOA. We did put in a couple of safari tents at our property in Wisconsin Dells this last fall and this spring. So those will be online this year. That's kind of our first real big foray into glamping accommodations. We recently purchased the Gettysburg Battlefield KOA, and it has a lot of acreage, and that's one of the things that we like about it.
A lot of hills too.
Yeah, a lot of hills. And so we brought in a consultant to look at it and say, we know that there's a demand for more sites here. This is a fantastic market. The park's doing really well. And like many of these, it was built a long time ago. Yeah. It's mostly back-in sites. I think there's only 4 or 5 pull-throughs in that whole park. And we know that that's an opportunity. But when we look at the topography that we have, it's really hard to develop. And so one of the ideas that we've talked about, and whether we do this or not, I don't know, but it's on the table, is could we develop some sort of a glamping type area or attraction or separate park or something like that, using that land and building into what nature's giving us. Time will tell if we do that or not. I think, we have some ideas of some really cool projects we'd like to do in the future as we grow and get to a point where we can take on some bigger, maybe more riskier type things, and get into the ecotourism business. But right now our focus is on RV sites and how can we accommodate the RV traveler. That's the easy one. And then in our properties where they're maybe underserved with accommodations, then we'll look at cabins and, the wagons that we added in Sheridan. Fun project. I think those are really, really cool, but also it really fit the theme there. And so, Sheridan, Wyoming being a very cowboy, Wild West type area, having a couple of wagons makes a ton of sense. So, and those haven't even been in for a full year. So as we see how they perform, that will determine whether we add to that or what we decide to do there going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Any concerns about the current economy and people coming out to camp? I mean, when I talk with other owners in the industry, they're always like, "Oh, camping's always affordable and people always camp." Are there any concerns about that moving forward?
It's a really good question, Ben, and I think there's a more not complicated, but a more thought out answer to it. In the short term, meaning over the next 3, 6, 8 months, do I think that it might be a little bit of a challenging market? Yeah, could be. Gas prices are still higher than they were a few years ago, but they've come down off of highs from not too long ago. There's still a lot of uncertainty around what's going on in the market with interest rates, and as buyers, obviously that impacts us. And I have to assume that for our guests, that impacts them and their businesses and what they're doing. As those types of things will impact individuals from the inflation side and all of that. So yeah, in the short term, I think there's still some headwinds, but that doesn't mean that camping has lost any of its appeal. But we approach this with the long-term view. Do I think that over a 10-year period, camping is going to be less popular 10 years from now than it is today? And I don't think so at all. I think it'll continue to grow. I think people will continue to want to get outside and enjoy the open skies and the fresh air and to get some recreation and get away from their jobs. And it's, the world we live in today, a lot of times it's hard to really get away and decompress if you don't get out. You can't, at least for me. I mean, I'm in one of the bedrooms of my house working. So if I'm not working, I'm still in my house. I still feel like work is there. If I really want to get away, I've got to get out into the mountains. I've got to go hiking. I've got to get in my van and go for a road trip. So I think that the long-term outlook for the outdoor industry is very good. The rest of this season could be an interesting one. But I don't think that we're looking at at a bad situation. We just might not be growing at the rate that we were a few years ago, but I think we'll get back to that in the next couple of years for sure.
What's the market like for inventory for campgrounds up for sale? Is that been lagging also?
There seem to be enough deals out there. The issue that we see, Mike, is the gap between buyer and seller expectations. And maybe that will always be the case. But what we have been encountering over the last couple of years is sellers are still thinking about valuation based off of 2020 and 2021 market conditions. And it hasn't been until recently where I think that's starting to change a little bit, where they're starting to understand that if a buyer can't get a loan at under 7.5%, the value of the property is not going to be what it would be if they could get that loan at 4.5%. So, we've had those conversations where that they've, the owners have looked at valuing their park. Obviously, there's an emotional attachment to it. It's been their family legacy for a long time. Or they just feel like they've invested a lot of sweat equity and a lot of time and a lot of money. So they want to get that out of it when they sell. And when you run the numbers, and just to service the debt on it is going to take up all of the profit that the park produces, obviously that deal doesn't pencil out. So I think there's opportunities out there. Now, whether or not there's a surplus of good opportunities for buyers, I don't think it's what it was a few years ago. So that's one of the things that we feel like we have an advantage because of our relationship and our network. Most of the properties that we have purchased have been off market and direct from the sellers. So we have a little bit of, a little bit more flexibility in how we're negotiating those and looking at the pricing and valuations and working directly with the sellers, where, the deals that we've seen, the big brokerage houses have come in and set really, really artificially high expectations of what these properties are worth. Makes it hard to negotiate that down. Yeah.
Any chance you guys will develop a park if you haven't already, I guess?
We haven't developed from scratch. We have done a fair amount of expansion projects. We're about to break ground here in the next couple months. In Wisconsin, we had bought 8.5 acres adjacent to our park there in the fall, and we designed a 55-site expansion and got all the zoning and permitting and bids and everything to get going on that. So we're hoping to do that, which is essentially the equivalent of a ground-up development. But our strategy has been focusing on buying existing properties that are profitable and expanding those. And I think down the line, maybe a few years from now, we'll be in a position where we could take on, a true development project. But right now, we feel like it's a better opportunity for us and for our investors to buy existing and to try and build those out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kevin, it's been great getting to chat with you. The end of the show's here, so we have to get going. People can learn more about KCN Campgrounds at kcncampgrounds.com. And you have your portfolio on there, a section about care camps and then for investors. So people can check that out. Thanks, Kevin, for coming on. And hopefully I'll see you at some shows down the road.
Yeah, I'll be there. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And we will be back again next week.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com.